Hellblade 2 is great. I loved it. I genuinely had such a tremendous time playing this video game, and I am shocked, but not surprised at some of the backlash. While the general review sphere has been pretty positive with a lot of pros and cons that I do agree with, I found that on YouTube there is a certain lack of nuance to be found. And so, of course, as the arbiter of taste on this website, it's my job to help bring that to the people. It's my goal here today to tell you why I personally loved the game and found it to be an excellent follow-up. Obviously, everyone's allowed to have their own opinions and subjectivities, even if they are wrong and mine is right. However, a lot of my problem stems from a lot of these people literally not understanding the game.
Meanwhile, Senua's journey is a depiction of how others interact with one who suffers from psychosis, and the game displaying how her darkness, as they put it, is a gift that can save her people. I think? I'm not entirely sure here.
And therefore, I don't feel that is a very authentic way to give a legitimate recommendation. Spoilers will not be in the majority of this video outside of the designated spoiler section in the back, because I want people to play this game and experience it for themselves. However, I really want to talk about the story, so I'm going to do that, but in the spoiler zone. But I'm also not really going to talk about how the game looks or sounds, because like, everybody knows it looks incredible. It sounds incredible. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. I'm not here for that. I'm here for some more fair and balanced, nuanced takes on the gameplay and the story. Because real talk, I'm pretty sick of this whole walking simulator bias thing. Like, why are games with a billion mechanics and 10% of a story allowed? However, when a game has a billion story and 10% of mechanics, somehow that's illegal. I'm gonna keep it a buck. If you are looking for major mechanical and gameplay changes from the first one, you will not find that here. The second one is borderline the same. You hold forward, you do some fun little puzzles, you slap some guys around, you get your ass blown off by some amazing set pieces. That's kind of the game. Your combat kick from the first game is gone though, but I don't really know if anybody cares about that, so meh. The best way to describe it is they really just kind of refined everything from the first game moving into the second. Senua handles better because there is more weight to everything that you do. Combat has small details to make it feel less floaty and way more realistic. The design of the world that Senua inhabits feels much more seamless and integrated than the disjointed psychedelic nature of the first one. And given the themes and progression of the first one, that's fine. They're two different games, two different stories. That's not a dig. That's just how it is. In my opinion, the big overarching change that differentiates the first game from the second game is the structure and how that affects the storytelling and the gameplay pacing. The structure of the first game is very predictable and a bit more energetic in terms of initial gameplay compared to the second game, which makes sense thematically. You are very consistently tossed into puzzle and then combat and then boss until the end of the game. Again, this makes sense. Senua is in the throes of grief and anger. Her bow is in a bag. She is quite literally losing her mind and going through this gauntlet of terrors and challenges to find some sort of peace. A lot like me when I wake up in the middle of the night and have to take a bad poop, and then I kind of sit on the toilet in agony, rocking back and forth, just kind of praying to find the light at the end of the tunnel. What was I talking about? The second game is much less predictable. It's a nice slow burn with this emphasis on continual discovery. And this is very much reflected in not only the themes, but how the story progresses and how everything intertwines with the gameplay. All of these things slowly ramp up with these ebbs and flows in a very much a non-traditional pattern that I think fit quite well with the story that the game is trying to tell. The world structure, as I said before, feels much more connected than just kind of throwing you into space after space, arena after arena. The game is still very much drenched in myth and folklore and metaphor and superstition and a deep representation of mental illness. It's just shown in a different way this time. And it's a different game, so I'd expect it to be shown differently. Please don't believe the people complaining and saying things like, oh, the story is bad, or there is no story, or oh, are things real now? Are they contradicting the first game? No, they're not. The writers know what they are doing. Nothing is completely real. Nothing is completely myth. Nothing is completely anything. Senua is a fundamentally unreliable narrator, and this is a very metaphorical story that is absolutely drenched in unreliable narration and symbolism. That is what the first game is. That is what the second game continues to be. And if you thought that to be otherwise, I encourage you to play it again. And in case you're wondering, yes, I did actually play through the entire first game again before talking about this, because I wanted to remember things all fresh, because my brain fucking sucks. And that old game came out 7 years ago, and that's a long ass time. And I can tell that people making these reviews very much don't remember it well either. Fucking Luke Stevens complaining about the voices in the second game really feeling like a gimmick and only giving you context clues. Well, you know what, Luke?
What's that? It's a wall. It's a door. No, it's a bridge. No, it's not. Push it. Push it. Push it. Do you think will happen? Come on. Come on. Push it. She did it. The pyre. Cert is through there. He's waiting for her. You can't get through. How will she get through?
She'll need to find another way.
Another gate.
She needs to find it.
Another person.
Another fire sacrifice.
They did that shit plenty in the first game. In fact, in some instances, some of the voices went even further as to borderline break the fourth wall and straight up tell you what to do for these fucking puzzles.
To break the seal, align the ravens with the mark of Valravan.
It's almost like Senua has a different relationship with them in this game because of everything that happened in the first one. I don't know, man. I don't know. And this brings me to probably the second major difference from the first game that I feel is a lot of the reason for people getting their titties in a twist over Hellblade 2. I'm going to be completely honest with you, 100%. This is a game that wants you to pay attention to its themes and to its deeper story narrative and to its weirdness. It wants you to sink into its atmosphere and its metaphor and its symbolism in a way that is less inherently obvious than the first game. That does not make the story in the second game any worse or any better than the first game. It just makes it a differently told story than the first one. And therefore, you have to engage with it differently. I don't want to sound condescending here, but if you want to kind of half pay attention to this game and expect some obvious exposition on a surface level narrative to kind of explain things to you, you're probably not going to understand what's going on. And I get the feeling that's kind of what people are reacting to. In the first game, it's super easy to have a grand old time following kind of the main surface level story of her husband's dead and in a bag and her people got massacred and she's sad and she got to accept the mental illness. Wahoo. Don't get me wrong, here it's amazing, it is personal, it is deep, it is nuanced. The performance, of course, sells it completely. But there is a deeper level to the story that I think is pretty easy to not miss because of how good the initial game is at making what's going on with Senua very, very obvious. Again, it's not bad. It's just different. There's a rather important part of the first game that I don't see a lot of people, especially in the Hellblade 2 reviews, really talk and discuss about because they completely disregard the story. And that's the fact that Hellblade 1, that deeper level narrative, is very much about how exploitative systems of power gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss people like Senua with trauma and mental illness, so people like her father can maintain their stranglehold on society through upholding these myths like wrathful gods as a means of using fear to control people. We live in a society, basically.
I remember it clearly now.
She has nothing to fear anymore. The gods have saved your mother. Through my hand.
You killed her.
It is the will of the gods.
Fuck the gods! You did this to her! Why?
This is what happens when you listen to the voices of the underworld. They crawl into your soul and rot you from the inside. Defy the gods like your mother, and the darkness will come for you too. You understand, Senua?
I do understand.
You cursed me with your own madness. I was just a child. You created this darkness! You created this darkness so you could hide behind it!
Only suffering brings salvation. It is the way of the gods.
It was all a lie. You are a lie!
Again, we're in the no spoiler zone for the second game here. But if you didn't really catch a lot of that stuff from the first game, you're going to have a lot harder of a time following the story of the second, because there's so much more emphasis put on that second level of deeper themes. And for me personally, like, that fucking rules. That more subtle, nuanced story and the non-conventional structure keeps you from being just a brain-on, pattern, puzzle fighting boy, and instead actually really forces you to engage with the core narrative of the game. And because the game is objectively demanding more of its audience than the first game, this is what I think a lot of people are being angry about. The game is demanding more from you. It is way less literal, and therefore, people are going to be angry at the developers instead of being like, maybe I should just sit and contemplate what I just experienced, instead of saying the writers don't know what the fuck they're doing. This is the same shit that I saw with the Talos Principle 2. Fucking incredible game. Love it. One of my favorite from this year. And people were mad that the developers made a deep, more nuanced, and much more integrated story into the gameplay. And they didn't like that they couldn't just kind of glaze over everything and do the little puzzles and have a great time. Now, I understand that the more simplistic gameplay of Hellblade 2 might be somewhat unattractive for people. But again, it's in the name of telling an incredible story. And I think that's why people are mad, because they feel like both the gameplay and the story are dog shit. When in reality, the story is fucking incredible and the gameplay is just like good. And therefore, everything seems bad. And I'm not trying to say that I'm smarter than these people, even though in some ways I definitely am. I didn't pick up on everything in the first time. I sat and thought and went over the game and what I played and fucking went in my brain and fucking mind palaced that shit, and I looked stuff up and I was like, holy fuck. The longer I think about and sit with this art piece instead of just having a knee-jerk reaction that the developers are terrible, the more I fully appreciated how outstanding this video game is. And this is such a common practice for a piece of art, but because a lot of people view video games as almost utilitarian. Like, they aren't even treated as art in some sense. Like, one of my favorite things that a guy has said that relates to this whole mental difference between someone like myself who views games as an art and people who view games as a product is the infamous Jay-Z quote, "You can't listen to an album in a day."
First of all, you can't listen to an album and rate it in a day. It's just impossible.
Oh, Magna Carta classic, 10 minutes after it comes out.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a serious thing. You
impossible
have
to
to live
even
with
get
it.
what the nuances, all the instrumentation, all the words, what is being, said in the music, what it's about. Like, it's impossible to do that in 24 hours. And when I see that, I'm like, oh, so this is all just, what I mean? It's like, okay, so I can't put any, I can't put any weight in it. It's good. You review the album, it's great. You like it, fantastic. You don't like it, that's good too. But it doesn't mean anything.
Like, you just can't. You can't absorb everything a piece of art is trying to offer you, trying to appeal to you, and how you will react and process it over the course of however long you look at it, however long you listen to it, however long you engage with it. You gotta sit. You gotta contemplate. You gotta think. You gotta absorb. You gotta feel. But some people's brains be broken. And therefore, if they don't like it immediately, it's dog shit. Again, I completely understand if some people might be underwhelmed with a simplistic gameplay. But I don't care. I'm in this for the story. The gameplay does not interfere or reduce the impact that the story has. It is a vehicle for the story. Exactly like how a lot of annoying, shitty, grindy games or whatever simply have a really bad, dog shit, lazy story that is simply meant to be an enabler for that gameplay. For some reason, people have a lot more of a problem with the first one than the second. To me, the second game is a refinement of nearly everything in the first one. And as someone who, again, is in this for the story, for Senua's Saga, I ate really fucking good. I love getting into the tangle of myth and themes and engaging with the metaphor, the new characters, the brilliant visual and auditory accompaniment that really just brings everything together for me. Like, it was just such an amazing experience. The gameplay works for the kind of cinematic, linear story that they wanted to tell. Sure, I'm sure on some level you could argue that the immense visual fidelity of the game limited the gameplay and the mechanics that they could utilize. I'm not going to dispute that. In fact, I think it's probably true. But again, for me, that limitation did not make the story worse. I was there for the story. That's what I wanted. I really didn't care about the gameplay. Because again, the gameplay from the first one was fine. Combat was floaty. Like, the level design was very gamey. I don't know. It was fine. But again, it's in service of the story. And the second game is the exact same way. And that's why I love it. I really, really did. I understand that my perspective is not the same as everyone's, but I think that context and understanding why you are engaging with a particular art piece is important. At the very least, I hope that my spiel has maybe made you think about the second game a little differently, or contemplate trying and playing it yourself with this newfound perspective with how I, a Hellblade 2 enjoyer, enjoy the game. Okay, we're about to move into spoiler town, so if you don't want to hear spoiler towns, get your fucking booty out of here, baby. But if you don't, if you do want to leave, if you do want to stay in spoiler town, just like leave the video playing in like a background tab or whatever, so I can get that tasty watch time. Thank you, spoiler time. Hellblade 2 is a motherfucking rhythm game, baby. When I got into the giant fight and then I realized that the lava and the water bursts were like synced to the music, and you were going like running down, and then you hid behind the thing, and you were like, oh my god. I was like, oh my god, that's fucking insane, dude. So, as I stated before, the structure and the nuance level of the story is more complex than the first game, which is amazing for people like me who really like to kind of dig in to things like that and find all the cool little pieces and make all the neat symbolic connections. It's great. This game really keeps you on your toesies with a narrative and pacing that ebbs and flows in a less predictable way, with major sections of the game feeling quite distinct from one another, and how you're supposed to engage with them as opposed to it being relatively predictable the entire way through. I think the activities and the atmosphere that you engage in each zone feels a bit more distinct from the first game because there is so much more of an unknown factor. In the first game, broadly speaking, as striking as everything looks, you're always in some sort of intense chaos, heading towards one specific goal of solving that continual stress that Senua is feeling. Senua's state and the state of the areas and the people that Senua interacts with feels like it has much more variance and more highs and lows than in the first game. And I think that creates a really interesting tension and pacing technique that really gives the story just this really satisfying arc to this just like really beautiful conclusion. The reason why I mentioned the whole "we live in a society" themes from the first game is because that narrative, that underlying narrative from the first game, is the narrative in this game. The entire story structure of this game revolves around Senua taking her own personal growth and revelations about her darkness and the manufactured narrative that people like her father used to control her and other people from the first game, and use that insight, use that knowledge to show people that they too are being gaslight, girl-bossed, and gatekept by other people who are in power. Specifically, Thorgester's daddy. I don't remember his name, but he looks really ugly. Now, personally, I could tell that this undertone of society was pretty consistent in the narrative throughout this second game. What I didn't remember at all until I replayed the first game is that it was really important in that one as well. And I think that having gone back and replayed the first one and fully experiencing her story again as a whole, that made the impact of her narrative in the second game becoming that kind of guide and teacher through the trials and tribulations she went way better. Like, such a smart move by the writers and the developers to kind of put Senua in this role, from outcast to teacher and potential leader. Now, I can't blame people for not remembering this. Like, game came out 7 years ago, you know? But I think as people who do video game reviews, or who talk about them, you have a bit of a duty and a diligence to do that research, or at least pay attention to the fucking video game so you can see what it's trying to do, instead of just saying the story's dumb or not there. This game is basically Senua getting to her farming arc, like Thorfinn in Vinland Saga. She learns that she doesn't have any enemies, that killing people will not solve any problems, that using fear and violence will not solve any problems, and just continue a cycle of violence for generations and generations without solving anything. With the exception of the spooky descent fuckers, alright? Like, those guys very clearly just like, bye. I think it was such an incredibly smart move by the developers to make the cast of characters, Thorgester and Fargrimir and that one lady who I don't remember the name of but was really hot, all victims of this same system of power that Senua learned to effectively excise herself from and see through. She is teaching them and helping them grow, and as such, she's also coming to terms with more of the bad stuff that happened to her, such as feeling blame for the deaths of other people, just like how she felt blame for the deaths of her village that her father, gaslight, gatekept and girl bossed her into believing. And I think that's amazing. She's helping people resolve the same darkness that she too was once plagued by. It's a beautiful arc for a girl. Homegirl is growing up, and it makes perfect sense as a second game narrative. Her ending contemplation, speech, soliloquy, whatever you want to call it, about what she could become and realize that she can be better is beautiful, it is moving, it is an incredible finale, and I think an amazing note. And I truly believe that the people who are saying that it just feels like the game is getting started at this point, and not that this is a fine conclusion to an excellent narrative, genuinely do not know what the fuck is going on. And this calls back to my previous point. For people who mostly followed the kind of major top-level narrative of the first game, of Senua working through her personal stuff with some more obvious notes of exposition and a very predictable pattern to how the game progresses, they wanted that from this game. And that's not this game. It's not predictable. It's not as overtly obvious. And if you don't actually pay attention and really try to think about the symbolism and what the characters are going through, like, you're probably not going to have any idea what the fuck is going on. So much of this story is emphasized by understanding the land that you are in, the myths that surround it, like the whole amazing section with the hidden folk. Since this game is very much like the first one and is a soup of metaphor and superstition and folklore and representation of mental illness, I firmly believe that the whole scenario with the Draugr and the giants is one big representation of trauma-induced group psychosis. Only as Senua gets more and more integrated with the land and talks to the people and learns about everything that's going on in the state that it's in, she too gets more and more immersed in what these people are dealing with on an everyday basis, and I think becomes almost part of that broader group hallucination. I think the scene in the village when the ritual is going down and that one guy's like, Il Toiga, Il Toiga. And then there's like steam and like fire and smoke and like the earth's breaking apart and shit. And Senua and people are fucking hauling ass and getting away. And people are like, oh my god, oh no. And then they turn around and then it's just like completely clear and there's like nothing actually going on. I think I messed up my camera orientation when I changed things around. Whatever, we'll deal with it. I think the fact that Senua has no idea what Il Toiga is until Fairgrimir actually tells her that she is a giant, and then she sees her in that sequence afterwards, I think it's a reasonable interpretation to think that the Draugr who were fucking vibing and Fairgrimir, as he was looking back, perhaps saw Il Toiga or like an arm or a leg or a piece of her or something that Senua could not see because she literally didn't know what to look for. And again, that brings us back to this continual theme of understanding and discovery throughout the entire game in basically all aspects of the storytelling and the narrative elements and the gameplay elements, with even how the little hidden folk puzzles are like, oh, look at the fucking ramp show up. Wow. So much of the game and the story and the stuff that Senua and other characters are dealing with revolve around both being able to actually engage with it and being able to solve any problems it might make through understanding and learning its true nature. After she goes through the sequence of finding Il Toiga's baby and dealing with all that shit in the fucking spooky cave, it's not a coincidence that the darkness that was on Thorgester's arm at the beginning of the game goes away after he learns that there is a different option to pursue than just trying to kill the giant. Senua has given them the insight and the power to change themselves and change their circumstances. And that is so incredible, considering we know how fucked up she's been in the past. I think a lot of the symbolism in the Hidden Folk sequence kind of confirms even more my theory about this big quest for understanding And this extrapolation that I found on their history from good old Wikipedia, I think is really, really helpful, contextualizing the purpose of the fucking spooky cave and everything that the hidden folk were trying to teach Senua and what she is trying to do. The Huldu folk are not so much supernatural as ultranatural, representing not an overcoming of nature in the hope of a better deal beyond, but a deep reverence for the land and the mysterious powers able to cause fertility or famine. A guy whose name I can't pronounce claims that in a landscape filled with earthquakes, avalanches, and volcanoes, it is no wonder that the native people have assigned some secret life to their landscape. There has to be some unseen powers behind such unpredictability and cruelty. I think that this context makes so much sense. Myths around wrathful gods, unseen forces, assigning some secret life to a lot of this stuff, some unknown power, I think, is such an important part to the mythology of a lot of these people's beliefs in the story, and how Senua, through her past journey and her current revelations, are realizing that these people, everyone she involves with, as formerly herself, were completely under the influence of people who were trying to utilize that in a negative and deeply manipulative way. Big Papa is that representation of trying to get a better deal beyond by overcoming and controlling nature in their favor. Whereas what Senua is doing is having that deep reverence for nature and developing a healthy relationship with what the world is actually like to build something that is amazing for everybody instead of just being an evil asshole and trying to take complete control and absolute power by girl boss, gaslighting, and gatekeeping people into being also assholes. Coming to terms with the unpredictability of life and of the world and how we operate in it is so unbelievably difficult. I don't think anybody ever really truly does that. Even in today's age, coming to terms with the unpredictability of the world and everything that happens is incredibly challenging for most people, including myself. The desire for power and control over your own life and the bad things that happen is so unbelievably tantalizing and something that so many people desperately want that they will cling to deeply, deeply problematic beliefs and violent behaviors in order to achieve that level of control. And this is an example in the old world of somebody, Borgester's Papa, doing that, leaning into these myths, into these harmful structures, into these false beliefs to get that desired control over his own life and the lives of his people. And thus he became that very force of nature that needs to be dealt with. And Senua is the only fucking person who, through her past miserable traumatic experience, is able to deal with him and show other people you can be nice. You can be just a nice little guy. You don't have to fucking... Gods? Gods? Nah, man. No gods. Only men. Bioshock? I'm starting to lose my fucking mind. I'm out of script. I need to fucking wrap this bitch up. In summary, I think that this is a fantastic, nuanced narrative with so much meat on its bones, with new character additions that have purpose and give Senua, our main homegirl, this fantastic continual growth that really propel her into feeling like somebody who has done the work, gone through the trials, learned to actually make the world a better place. She has come from a place of misery and self-hatred and violence and death and transformed herself and is able to take that transformation and growth and learnings to help transform other people, other societies that we live in into something better for everybody. And gosh dang it, if that ain't beautiful, I don't know what is. I will say the one part of the story that kind of bothered me is when you're in the spooky forest and it's like, pick between Fargrimer or the hot lady, and then you do, and I was like, oh my god, what the fuck is gonna happen? Is someone gonna fucking die? But then nothing really happened, and I don't know. I guess I kind of wanted more from that, but I don't know. Like, everything else, banger, slapper, brilliant. Anyways, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching my video and looking at my feet this whole time. That's extremely cool, and I hope that I gave you a good perspective on why I like the video game and why you should be careful about YouTube reviewers who are really actually pretty bad at their job. Media literacy. Okay, that's the end of the video. I gotta take a shit.
Till the day I meet you, I'm riding up. I look up in the skies, asking out a while, but never let it faze me. I'm keeping good vibes when I'm on the road. Watch out for all